It was the end of October. The air was crisp, and the leaves formed a fiery autumn carpet. Our school had organized a field trip to Hoia-Baciu Forest in Romania, famously dubbed the world's most haunted forest. Rumors of it being a hotspot for paranormal activities and UFO sightings were enough to fill our teenage hearts with a mix of fear and excitement. We arrived in the early afternoon, the sun filtering through the dense canopy, casting eerie shadows on the forest floor. Our teacher, Mr. Kovacs, briefed us on the historical importance and the strange phenomena reported in the forest. He cautioned us to stay together and not stray from the marked trails. But where's the fun in that, especially when you're 17 and feel invincible? Troy, my best friend, nudged me as the group began to follow a well-trodden path. "Let's check out that area," he whispered, pointing to a denser part of the forest where the trees seemed to twist unnaturally, their branches intertwined like the arms of spirits dancing in the wind. We strayed from the group, our hearts pounding not just from the thrill of disobedience, but also from the chilling silence that enveloped us as we ventured deeper. After about 20 minutes, we stumbled upon an old cabin, whose existence seemed to have been swallowed by overgrowth but still resisted the test of time. The cabin appeared to have been abandoned for decades, yet there were fresh footprints in the mud, too large to belong to any animal. The door was ajar, creaking sinisterly as the wind pushed it. Troy and I exchanged a look, our curiosity piqued beyond reason. Inside, the air was musty, with a faint hint of something metallic. The walls were covered with crude and disturbing symbols, circles intertwined with lines and what appeared to be figures with elongated limbs. It was unlike anything we had seen in our mythology books. Suddenly, a soft whisper broke the silence. We froze. The whispers grew louder, but we couldn't make out the words. It was as if the very air around us was vibrating with echoes from the past. Our eyes darted around, searching for the source when we heard footsteps outside. They were deliberate, slow, as if whoever it was knew we were inside. In panic, we ducked behind a rotting wooden table just as a shadow appeared at the window. It stopped, and a face peered inside, gaunt, with sunken eyes that seemed to see right through us. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it moved away, the footsteps fading into the distance. We waited what seemed like an eternity, our breaths shallow and hearts racing. When we finally dared to look outside, the forest appeared untouched, the cabin once again wrapped in its solitary quiet. We ran back to the trail, the forest around us alive with the rustling of leaves and distant calls of birds, as if laughing at our fright. We rejoined the group unnoticed, keeping our adventure to ourselves. But the encounter at the cabin haunted us. Had we seen a ghost, a hermit, or was our imagination fueled by the legends of Hoia-Baciu? Now, years later, the memory still gives me chills. The cabin in Hoia-Baciu Forest remains a chilling enigma, a common subject among us, but also a haunting memory. The morning mist still hovered over the fields when our school bus rumbled along the gravel road leading to the old Whitmore mansion. Rumors about that place had circulated throughout the school, stories of ghosts and mysterious disappearances. But that October morning, it all seemed like one big adventure. Mr. Harlow, our guide, greeted us with a smile that barely masked his nervousness. He began by telling us about the mansion's history, which dated back to the 19th century, a time when it was known for lavish parties and, more sinisterly, strange rituals that took place under the moonlight. I, fascinated by the occult, found myself increasingly captivated by every word. As we explored the dusty rooms and corridors filled with portraits of stern gazes, I felt a strange pull towards a discreet door at the end of the main hallway. Ignoring Mr. Harlow's warnings not to stray, I slipped into the secret room. It was a small office, covered in old books and yellowed papers. In the center, a thick diary rested on the desk, as if waiting for me. I opened the diary, its pages creaking with ancient secrets. The handwritten words told stories of rituals dedicated to forgotten entities and dark offerings made in the mansion's basement. My heart raced, and a chill ran down my neck as I read. The atmosphere grew heavy, the air laden with a dense energy. That's when the sounds began, whispers almost inaudible at first, growing into painful moans that echoed through the corridors. The floor trembled slightly under my feet. Closing the diary abruptly, I stood up, determined to find my group. But as I left the office, the mansion was no longer the same. The corridors seemed longer, and the portraits on the walls seemed to follow me with their eyes. I ran, my heart pounding in my ears, trying to find the exit. Every corner brought a new cold breath. Every empty room seemed to murmur my name. Finally, I found the group in the grand hall, where Mr. Harlow was telling stories of apparitions sighted in the mansion. I recounted what I had found and read, and the guide's expression immediately changed. He hurried us outside, his voice trembling as he instructed everyone to gather on the bus. On the way back, as the mansion disappeared from view through the foggy window, I couldn't shake the feeling that something from that place had followed me, a cold that had taken root in my chest. Since that day, I've never been the same, completely losing interest in the occult. The Whitmore Mansion remains in my memories. Some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. During the weekend, our university excursion, aimed at studying ancient legends, had turned into a real field investigation of the supernatural. The old woman of the mountains, an almost mythological figure whom the local Catskill residents avoided mentioning, seemed like a distant legend until that Saturday night. We had set up camp near an old wooden cabin, hidden among the thick trees and moss that covered the forest floor. The place had an air of abandonment, with broken windows and a door hanging by a single hinge. We were supposed to be analyzing cultural phenomena, but curiosity led us to explore the cabin as night fell. The air inside the cabin was stagnant, filled with the damp smell of rotting wood. Our flashlights barely illuminated the corners, casting shadows that danced on the walls as we moved. That's when we heard the first whisper. It was a faint voice, almost muffled by the wind passing through the cracks in the roof. "You shouldn't be here." The sound came from behind us. We turned quickly, the flashlights pointing to emptiness. There was no one there. Each of us breathed heavier, our hearts beating at a frantic pace. We tried to laugh it off, nervously, suggesting the wind was playing tricks on us. We decided to leave, but before we could move, a loud thud came from upstairs. It sounded like the weight of heavy footsteps, dragging across the creaking floor above whatever was there. My mind screamed to run, but we were paralyzed, trapped by curiosity and fear. "Look!" The voice was clear now, coming from all around, whispering directly into our ears. The walls of the cabin began to vibrate slightly, as if the structure itself was alive. Then we saw her, a shadow in the corner, growing in stature until we could make out a tall, hunched female figure, with long dark hair covering part of her pale face and eyes that glowed with their own light, a deep red that seemed to absorb the light from our flashlights. "Leave," she said, her voice now a growl, deep and menacing, "before she traps you here." With that, the temperature dropped, a penetrating cold that made us shiver to the bone. We needed no further warning. We ran out of the cabin, tripping over roots and rocks, driven by pure terror. We didn't look back until we were back at the camp, panting heavily, looking at each other in disbelief. The night was long, no one talked much, and the sound of the wind seemed to carry echoes of that voice. When the sun finally rose, we packed up quickly. No one wanted to stay a minute longer. The ride back was silent, each lost in their thoughts, trying to unravel whether what we had experienced was real or just a product of our collective imagination. Looking back now, the fear still makes me question our decision to ignore the warnings. Some stories are better left as legends, never to be disturbed, and I learned that in the most frightening way possible.